Hey everybody, it's Rick, and thanks for joining me on another Inwyt Walkabout. I'm walking through my neighborhood today. Spring is finally showing itself with new leaves and blossoms and so forth. It's raining or threatening to rain, so hopefully I'll get this walk in before I get drenched. I wanted to talk a little bit about a continuity from our last walk where we were talking about situational awareness and share with you a experience that I had actually this past week where one of my sons just graduated with a master's degree in engineering technology. And I've been to a fair number of graduations this year. Had another son who graduated the week before with his undergraduate degree. And for this one that I wanted to talk about, some of the commencement addresses really focused on new beginnings and, the importance of curiosity. And there was a professor who shared his experience as a new doctoral degree recipient who thought he had it all figured out when he was done, had his PhD, was ready to go into academia, and shared with the audience and the graduates the challenges that he faced in the first 2 years, where every single grant that he applied for was basically rejected. And he thought he had everything figured out, and here he was with basically nothing to support the research interests that he thought he had. And then there was another commencement address, really the featured presenters who were two entrepreneurs who also had kind of gone through their master's degree programs and had emerged again thinking that everything was sorted out and that they were going on a particular right path, that they knew exactly where they were going. And lo and behold, again, the path deviated from the expected. And, I think fundamentally the message for both of them was that, no one's path really necessarily ends up the way one expects it to or one plans it to be, and that really the success that ultimately came for them and probably comes out for a lot of people is to be curious and to really take life on with an exploratory view and really to be open to what's around and to see things afresh. And so, I also kind of think back to, made me think back to my own career progression where, probably from the very beginning when I was in college, maybe even before, I wanted to be a physician and I was hell-bent on being a surgeon and spend a huge amount of time preparing for surgery or surgical residency and ENT residency. And lo and behold, the path certainly was not straight. It ended up being crooked, bent. I ended up in anesthesia, and now I'm actually much more focused on change management, redesign, and all the things that we're talking about. So again, clearly a crooked path where ultimately I think for me the reinforcing message was to be curious and to really look at what's going on around you with innocence, if you will, with fresh eyes, and to see things as they actually are. And so it kind of got me thinking, as far as, what's the point of sharing all of this besides saying be curious, is it kind of got me thinking to how everything in our lives is really pointed in a very rigid and opposite direction in a lot of ways. So, for example, there's always terminology and language around purpose and direction and what's your focus and what do you want to do for a living and what's your concentration. All these words and all these terms, have slight differences, but at the same time, they have a consistent focus around specificity and narrowing things down to, a particular area of expertise that you want to develop or a passion that you want to follow. And it seems to me inevitable, particularly when I talk to folks around me at work or friends or even family, that for all the direction and all the desire that we have to have everything laid out exactly as it is, that even when that seems to be taking place, there's always an emptiness or there's always a stress or a frustration because for some reason it's not enough or it's just somehow not aligned with what we view as what matters. And so, we end up again in one of these curious spaces, I would say frustrating spaces, where we spend all this time developing particular skills and pursuing particular interests, research, whatever it is, career, athletics, you name it. And at the end of the day, it's not enough. And somehow it's not aligned with where we think we should be going. So, I think the interesting thing when you kind of step back for a second is that in a lot of ways our desire to be focused and really to have everything planned really falls back into this thought box mindset that we've been talking about before, where we have an expectation or a set of expectations, values, traditions that we think are correct and that we think should be. And we're always playing this game of, what we think is going on versus what we think should be. And, as we've seen time and again, that is a recipe for contradiction, division, fragmentation, and ultimately being in conflict. And, when you start to talk about seeing things holistically, as again we focused on a lot, I think one of the interesting uses of words and interpretations that always creep in is that when we try to say, what's the difference? Is there a difference between concentration and attention? How do we use those words in a way that maybe provides some distinction? And, I think based on what I've just shared is that concentration really becomes a term for narrowing your focus and really putting on shutters where you only see things in a particular way or through a particular lens, or you just focus on one thing because you say this matters the most, this should be. And as a result, you go through life, you go through activities, not seeing how whatever it is you're pursuing fits in the broader context. And probably as importantly, you just don't see what else is going on. You don't have a holistic view. And so, again, when you apply this at the micro level, where you're doing something and you're trying to put all your attention to it, we call it attention, but put our focus onto something, we get almost the creation of distraction by trying to block out those things that we say don't matter so that we can focus on what we think should be. And as a result, we don't see the whole picture. And we inadvertently create these stressors and divisions and fragments that both at the micro level in our daily activities ultimately balloon out and translate to how we value and place importance on the bigger things that we say, matter in life. So, think about the relationship of these terms of concentration, focus, what you do for a living, all these things that become narrowing elements that through our own use of, self-image, our values, expectations, really start to create a distance from, where we are in our lives and how we interact. And probably in many ways unwittingly put us in this position of just dissatisfaction, because somehow we're just constantly trying to fit in and define, our purpose. And, where there's purpose, there's, again, the concentration, the division, and all these terms that kind of play into it that really are very much the same thing. And, we just end up falling short all the time and never feeling like, we have big picture, that we're on target and we're doing what we want to. So that's it for today. Again, just think about how we always are showing up in fragments, at the very small things to the very big things. And, when we talk about curiosity, and when you ultimately have some sort of a breakthrough where, you have sort of that momentary opening of being at a dead end and saying, now what? Where the reflex is to find something to focus on anew, rather than to kind of step back and say, wait a minute, there's an opening here to see things more holistically. And, maybe there's a new beginning, a commencement, if you will, that actually can really be transformative if you see it and take advantage of it. So, I'm walking through an area here that is not very scenic, but I'll give you one more view as we sign off here. This is the side of, again, new construction that's going on in our neighborhood. I hope you have a great day, a wonderful week. Stay dry. I'm about to get poured on here. This is Rick with Inwyt Walkabout. Take care.